Hi, this is Raechel Whitchurch with John Broughton on Casey Radio 97.7 FM.
Don't be afraid of what might become.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Hey, thanks for joining me, and I believe it's a birthday for you today.
It's my birthday. I know, I'm 33. I'm actually 34 now. I'm getting old. So, yes. So, my husband prepped me because we've been on tour for 10 days. We got back late last night, and my mother-in-law kept our kids up past their bedtime so we could see them. And they were just so overtired. And then my husband said to me, just so you know, I don't have anything organised for your birthday tomorrow. And I was like, it's fine. We've been on the road for 10 days straight. So it's been a bit of a crazy time.
Oh, well, a massive happy birthday too. And you've got so many reasons to celebrate at the moment.
I know, it's exciting, and it's funny, I wouldn't have imagined, 2 years ago that, I think because one of the things, this is getting a bit interviewing now, but one of the things that, I was really nervous about with making this record, I was like, I think I'm too old to be trying to start a country music career. I think I've missed the boat, and so that was one of the things that stopped me for a long time. And so who would have thought 34, got my little number one Australian country album. It was just it's wild, so it's good times.
Yeah, well, let's get interviewing anyway, see how we go.
Love that.
Hey, just to start, I saw a wonderful video of you the other day, searching for your album on the shelves at JB Hi-Fi.
Oh my gosh! Did you see my crying face at the end?
Oh, the expression on your face was priceless. No doubt, getting this album out was a highly emotional experience for you.
Yeah, it was, and it was funny because when I cut the video down just to a couple of key parts, but we actually looked for quite a bit, and I think because I was in such a fluster, I must have looked over it 3 times, and just not seen it, and I couldn't figure out if it was under R or if it was under W, for my first and my last name, and so I was actually starting to feel a little bit I was like, it's not here, and you see me at one point go, it's not here, sad times, and my husband's trying to oh, it's okay, someone probably already bought it, and I'm like, I don't think so. But then when I saw it, it was a wave of emotions, and I was so grateful to my label for making that happen because, I don't know, it's just a little thing, but it feels like a big thing, when you've worked so hard to actually find and all the people that were in the country section were looking at me why is this lady crying in the country aisle? She really hates country music.
Look, before we talk about the record, let's just cover a little bit of background first, if that's okay.
Yeah.
There was a lot of musical influence in your family growing up, I guess. Well, pretty obviously there was. Do you think you would have gravitated to music just the same without that influence?
Yeah, it's funny, people always assume that there was a lot of music in my family, and there was in the sense that, my he played guitar, and his family, they played gospel music together when they were growing up, and so they, my grandfather was a minister of a local church out in Broken Hill, and so he and his kids, they always played, gospel music at the church and things like that. But when, I played in a family band for many, many, many years, but people don't realise that when my mum and dad made the decision that we were going to start a family band when I was 8, none of us played instruments. And so it wasn't we were all very musical and then we were let's be a band. My dad was let's be a band, and now we should probably learn an instrument. And so it was a bit back the front. And so, I started playing mandolin when I was 8. I had been getting piano lessons before that from when I was about 5, but I don't think anyone else had been getting any sort of musical lessons, to be honest. It was just kind of when my parents decided they wanted to be a family band. So, but I do think, my parents have a deep love of music, and not just country, all genres that have good storytelling. And I think storytelling was kind of the key that, tied their different musical loves all together, was hearing, a good story in 3 or 4 minutes.
I guess starting your career in a family band would have been a great way to ease your way into a career in music, especially at such a young age, to have your closest people around you. What mainly did you learn from those years?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing I'm realising now, going out and playing, again now, is just the really practical aspects of so knowing how to perform on stage. I think so many people, I've chatted with, artists that, have crossed paths with that are also pursuing music now, and a lot of them have said, oh, actually, I haven't got to do a live show yet. I'm like, what? And so a lot of them are making these records and they're not actually getting to, perform yet, which is crazy to me because I've grew up performing 3 or 4 times a week since I was 12 years old. So I think I feel very comfortable on stage, but I have done it for a very long time, and I think I enjoy reading a room and seeing how people are responding to my music. So that's a really practical thing. And I think the other thing from having done so many gigs is I think I am quite realistic in my expectations of what to expect from, a career in music. I don't have stars in my eyes, which is why, we spoke before about, going to JB Hi-Fi and seeing my album. That's like why things like that, mean so much, because if anything, I'm probably a little bit too realistic, to the pessimistic side, where I'm like, not everyone gets to become a star, and so if I can just play music to, a handful of people that love my music, then that's great. And so when really big things happen, it really means a lot to me.
Songwriting is something you took on at a very young age. What do you recall of your very first songwriting efforts? Were you trying to write beyond your years, or were you writing age-appropriate type material?
It's fun. I think it was a combination of both. I remember this song that me and my little sister Faith wrote when we were really young, which was hilarious. And it was called Sing Till My Heart Breaks. Because we listened to so much country music, and the lyrics are like literally, I'm going to sing till my heart breaks. I'm going down that track. I'm going real far and I'm never coming back. And so, we had these songs that were like, different snippets of other country music that we'd listen to. And, we would sing about, we'll put a train in there, and, we'll put, all the country music things in there. But we loved it, and that was because we were listening to so much old time traditional country that we just loved. But I think, I always, I don't think we were definitely not sheltered kids in that we were playing in pubs and clubs, every weekend. But my parents were always very, like, I don't know what the word is, but like, we were playing pubs and clubs every weekend. So in a way, they were always very, very careful and very, very safe with, with us. And so we had a very tight family unit, and there was just no opportunity for us, not to be safe, I guess, if that makes sense. And so I guess we definitely, we got the best of both worlds in that we had a realistic, view of what the world was. We were playing in pubs and clubs a lot of the time to drunks every weekend. And seeing that as a child, and mum and dad, asking questions, why are those people like that? Explain this to us. And so explaining it to us, but also we weren't in that world, we were there to do a job. And so I think we probably grew up, somewhat quickly, I guess, in the most innocent way possible, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that does. Was there a key moment in time, a light bulb moment, when you felt the time was right? It has this now or never to go down the solo path?
Yeah, and it was definitely, a lot of people are surprised by this. It was after I had my first kid. And so I had my son Graham, who we named after Graham Parsons because we love him. Yeah. And, I had him, and, I think everyone thinks they're cool until they have a kid, and then they're like, oh, wow, this is hard. This is the hardest thing I've ever done. And so I had a kid, and then, my husband and I, like, we take our parenting, like, quite seriously and feel very strongly about making sure that we're the best parents we can be, and we never want that to become a secondary thing to whatever other goals we're pursuing. And we were talking about the different values that were, we talked about it a lot before we even had, Graham, but the different values are important to us. And so we're really big in our family on, we can do hard things, and so things are hard, but we're going to try them anyway. And, taking risks and taking chances and all that, that lovely, theoretical jargon of, what you want your children to be. And I think for me, it was kind of like, like a punch in the stomach when I was just like, wow, I'm literally saying this, to my children and encourage them, trying to, encourage them to be brave and take risks. But I'm literally petrified of taking any sort of risk with music because it feels too scary and I feel, like I'm going to fail. And so I think like fear of failure stops so many people from doing wonderful things in the world because, we live in a society where, failure seems really bad. My parents were never scared of failure. They'd try 1,000 things and, lots of them would fail, but they'd keep trying. And so I don't know why I got this idea in my head that, I couldn't fail. But anyway, so that when I had my kids, I realized, if I want them to be strong and brave and risk-taking and, whatever, then I'm probably going to have to do it in my own life. And so it was after my first kid that I made the decision that I was going to try and get a career in music.
I saw you've also worked in the business side of music as well as a booking agent. Has that experience helped you in the management of your own career now?
So much, yeah. And I'd always worked on the bookings with Dad in the family band and helped with that side of things. I would do like our mailing list and, send out hundreds of letters. This was back when they would do it by mail. And so we'd spend a bucket load sending out letters to our fans. And then, I would, I actually got us our very first endorsement when I was, I must have been 14 years old. I convinced Fender Australia to give us a guitar sponsorship, and I still have it today. So we always, had jobs that we had to do, as part of our schooling and as part of the business. But then when I finished playing with my family band, when I was around 21, 22, my husband and I got married, and then I took a job in Sydney at one of the big country music booking agencies here in Sydney. And to me, that seemed like a natural progression. Like, if I'm not going to be performing music, then I can at least still enjoy it by helping other people, chase their dreams. And so that's kind of what I went to for a bunch of years and did that. But in a way, it sort of just fueled the fire of wanting to do it myself in a way, because once I started doing it, I was like, I could be doing this for myself, I could, and so I did that for a bunch of years and tried a few different things when I was in Sydney, and but now it's definitely so helpful, and once again, it's like that realistic expectation, of knowing that, how to get gigs and how to talk to people and what you're worth and all those things. So I've been very grateful to have, that skill set under my belt.
Yeah, for sure. Now, as we speak, you have the #1 album on the ARIA Country charts. Has that had a chance to sink in yet?
Not really. We found out on Friday when we were out on the road with Adam Harvey, and my label rang me a bit before 5 to let me know the good news. I was so shocked because I like our goal, I had a bunch of goals for this album that I thought were all very unrealistic, but that's who I am as a person. I make unrealistic goals. And so one of them was, I was like, I want to get in the top 10 for Australian country album. Like, if I can get into the top 10, I'll be stoked. And so I would, like, that's very rare for me to make a goal and then exceed that goal, because my goals are usually very lofty. And so when I found out that it was #1, I was like so emotional and just so happy. And my husband also, because we've worked on this project together for so many years. It just felt like a really beautiful, way to kind of, it's not I was going to say finish, but it's right at the beginning. We're at the beginning of the project.
Yeah.
It feels like, all the work that's gone in for the last 2 years, that was just like a beautiful way to kind of end that chapter of getting the album out. And then 3 days later, it's my birthday. And so I was like, what a great birthday present, to have the #1 Australian country album.
Absolutely. And of course, all this was meant to happen in 2020, but as we know, 2020 didn't turn out as planned for just about everyone. How much did you have to rejig your year last year?
Yeah, it was hard. I released my first single, and this, like we've spoken about, this was after, all of the soul searching of whether or not I should have a music career, and I released my first single on Friday, the 20th of March, and that was the day they locked down the country.
Good timing.
So I was like, this feels like someone's trying to tell me I shouldn't be having a music career. But I mean, look, there were so many people that were affected, and it feels very personal, when it's you, but everyone had plans, and everyone's plans were ruined by 2020. And so we just, I felt sad for a couple of weeks and, didn't really, know what to do. And then my husband and I just made a decision. We were like, we just got to do the best we can. We've just got to look at what we've got and then figure out how we're going to use that. And so one of the things I started doing after the single had been out for a bit was I started going through my list of, people I'd, maybe met or acquaintances I'd met in the music industry over the last, 20, 30 years or whatever. And thought I'm going to start reaching out to people and then just try and pick their brains on all the things I should be doing with this album. I thought, everyone's at home. I can set up some Zooms and just try and glean as much knowledge as I can from as many people as possible. And one of the people I reached out to was a guy called Graham Thompson, who runs Compass Brothers Records. And we'd met many times, and he has been, responsible for careers of people like, Adam Brand or Sunny Cowgirls or Kirsty Akers and so many people, Melinda Schneider, people like that. And I've worked with him on a few different things in the past, but we never really connected, on a personal, we hadn't had, time to talk about my music or anything like that. So I reached out to him and we got on the phone and started chatting, and I just asked him 1,000 questions, and he was so generous with his time and knowledge. And then, it led to another phone call, and then a couple months down the track, he offered me a record deal. And so I was like, that was just the most ridiculous thing for me to come out of 2020 was, amongst all of the hardship and all the hard times, meeting. And that probably wouldn't have happened, with Graham had it not been for 2020, because I wouldn't have been sitting at home with nothing to do, and not touring. And so I felt like it all just kind of worked out the way it was sort of supposed to. And then he's just worked with me so hard on this record, and we have a really small team, like, you know, the people that I work on my album, and he's one of them, and he has been so generous and so kind, and he's just so smart, you know, he just knows so much. And so definitely don't know if I would have had the amount of success I have had so far if it wasn't for him and his belief.
I was interested to read where you stated you wanted a clean record, that in the past you'd erred on the side of dirty and gritty. Was there any particular artist or album you had as a guide to aspire to for that cleaner sound you wanted?
Yeah, I really loved, I mean, there's so many great records, but I really loved Casey Musgrave's Golden Hour record. I just thought that was just a beautiful record. And one thing, I don't normally listen to, you know, that sort of pop country. I wouldn't say she's a bit alternative pop, but, like, you know, it's not something I would normally listen to. Yeah. But I think the thing that struck me about that record was I think the issue that I often take with pop country is usually it feels a bit empty. It doesn't feel like there's much substance behind the songs, and that's not always the case, but, you know, there is a lot of that in America, and so I think one thing that struck me about that record was I was like, her songs are so lyrically well written and melodically, like, they're so well written, but she's playing pop country, and I just found it really interesting to see someone who had so much to say and then did it in this sort of, like, you know, cleaner way, like, you know, so I think often, you know, we associate, you know, gritty and, you know, with substance, you know, like, and that's a really common thing, I think, in the country music world, you know, old country, Americana, and that's the real country, you know. But then when I listened to this record, I was really, you know, struck by how much, you know, she had to say lyrically, and yet she put forward this clean album. And so I'm much more country than that record, definitely. But I also had always kind of erred on the side of, you know, old country or Americana or a bit gritty. And I think a lot of it stemmed from maybe not believing that I was good enough to actually make a clean record either. You know, you can hide a bit behind grittiness. You know, you can, there's a few mistakes in there, but, you know, it's real country.
It's earthy, yeah.
And so I think, like, deep down, I think I had this, like, subconscious belief that I couldn't make a record like that because I wasn't good enough. And so when I went into the studio with Matt, I was like, I don't know if this is possible, but I said I'd really love to really try and make a softer, cleaner record, and really let the songs speak for themselves and leave space for the songs on the record. And he completely, as soon as I started, you know, and it's funny, you often talk in these, you know, to a producer in this weird language that makes no sense, you know, like, but he knew exactly what I wanted. And I feel like he did a great job with the record. I feel like he listened to exactly what I wanted, and then he had added his little, you know, take on that. And I feel like the song sounded just, you know, completely different than I ever thought they would sound, but so much better than I ever thought they would sound.
On the other hand, though, were you wary of not totally abandoning that grittiness? Did you want to get that balance just right?
Yeah, I think there's, like, I don't know. I think, you know, it depends on, you know, who you are as a person and where you've come from. But I feel like a lot of the songs, like, lyrical content is, you know, is quite real and quite gritty. Like, people are, it's a very hopeful album. I'm like, yeah, it's hopeful, but there's a lot of darkness in it, you know, like, there's a lot of soul searching in the record. And so I think I felt like, you know, lyrically, like, there was enough grittiness in that over what, you know, I've kind of gone through over the last 3 or 4 years. But yeah, and, you know, we had some great players, like my husband plays dobro and he played on the record. You know, we had Stewie French play on the record, and you know, a bunch of other we had a great pedal steel on there, and from a guy down Tassie. And so I think I concern myself less with trying to sound gritty and more with just trying to leave space for the songs to, you know, lyrically, you know, speak to, you know, that substance themselves, I guess.
Now, Matt Fell certainly is a producer in demand these days, and we've already touched on him a little bit here. Tell us about working with Matt and what he really brought to the table more than anything else for you.
Yeah, I think the thing I found, like, because he makes a lot of records, you know, he's producing for a lot of people, and when I was going in, I've never worked with him before. I think I thought, like, he might just be like, okay, I'm just going to phone this one in. It's just this girl I don't really know very well, and, you know, we can just smash this out and get it done. But watching him work, it was like, it was, you know, it felt like he acted as though I could have been the most important artist he was working with. The time that he spent on the songs, he didn't phone a single thing in. If a song, you know, sometimes he'd do a part, spend 3 hours on it, and then be like, nah, it's not right, start again. And I'm like, really? Feels close enough. He's like, no, close enough isn't good enough. And so he just, like, you know, he'd just go back to the drawing board and start again. And, you know, I felt like he just really cared about my songs and acted as though they were important. And I think that's when you're working with someone like Matt Fell, who is important, that really, feels really nice, that he cared, enough about my record to do that. But he really is a genius. Like, watching him work, it's literally like watching a crazy scientist work. Like, he just goes into this zone, and then sometimes I would be like, I'm not even going to speak, because he is deep into, some weird scientific moment with the banjo, so I'm going to let him have that.
Looking at the songs, would there be a theme, a recurring theme that runs through the songs on this record?
Yeah, I really do feel like hope is a recurring theme in the record, and I don't know if you've gotten that from it, but I feel like I feel like hope and not giving up and all those, very wholesome, goals and things like that. But I really do feel like it's been a really I think a time for me when I've grown a lot as a person as well. And I think, having kids does that to a lot of people, but I just feel like it really shows in the songs. And I think, I wanted to make a record where people could listen to it and then not feel bad about themselves afterwards, that they would listen to it and come away from it and feel like, I feel like I can do this. I feel like, maybe I've got something to say, or maybe, those goals I've been thinking about, maybe I could do it. And that was a really important thing for me. And I wrote a little a forward in the record about how I kind of got to this point of making this record and what I wanted for people who listened to it. And so I think, I think hope would probably be the recurring sort of theme that I was hoping to get across.
Tell us about writing a song like My Father. People do struggle to say what they want to say to loved ones in real conversation. What kind of emotions do you go through putting it all in a song like that?
I've been writing that song on and off for 5 years, that was probably one of the songs that took the longest to write. And it's because I just, firstly, you don't want to write a song for someone you love and then it be crap, firstly, because that's embarrassing. But also, I'd write, I'd be like, that's not quite right. And I think sometimes, when I'm writing a song that's personal, you're not quite sure how you feel. So it's almost like you're discovering your feelings as you're writing the song, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. And so I think that was the song that took the longest. And even up until the week before I went to the studio, that wasn't actually going to be a song on the record. That was just a song that I'd finished it off, and I thought, I think this is the final iteration, or this is the final version, and then but I don't think it's right for the album. And then when I went into the studio with Matt, we had 10 songs for the record, I believe. And then he said, do you have any others, while this is the last day of tracking, are you sure there's no others that you want to play to me and see what I think? And so I said, I've got one, just one that maybe, and I played it to him, and he was like, yes. He was like, it's a big yes on that one. Yeah. I was like, oh, okay. And so he was the first person that kind of was like, that has to go on the record. And so we recorded and put it on there. But it's really hard to write a personal song like that. But luckily, it's actually been the song I've had the most success with so far, which is crazy. I think it went to number 9 on the national radio charts, and then I looked the other day and we've got about 250,000 streams just from that one song. And so It's crazy. I think people just connected with the idea of loving their dads, I guess, and what it might feel like to lose them. So it's been a really nice song for me.
Another one that comes across as a very personal statement is You Ain't One of Us. Tell us about writing that one, and do writing songs of that personal nature help you personally deal with the issue at hand?
I often won't write a song until I've already processed my feelings around it, usually, because I feel like when I'm in the middle of trying to figure out, a difficult thing, I feel like my thoughts can be jumbled, and when you're trying to write a song, you need a bit of a hook in there somewhere. you gotta try and get your thoughts a bit clear. But that song, You Ain't One of Us, was actually a song I wrote about the last full-time job I ever had, and so I kind of already felt like maybe it was time to do the music thing, but like I said, still a bit fearful. And so I got offered this job, and I've always worked in the music industry or in event management and that sort of stuff, and really loved it. And then I got offered this job, and I thought, I'm not sure if this is the job for me. Like, I just remember going into the interview thinking the culture was a bit weird in the organisation, but against my, my gut feeling, I took the job, and then within 2 weeks of being there, I was like, these are not my people. This is not, I shouldn't have taken this job. And so that song's kind of all about that experience of, having that job or being in that environment and feeling like, I didn't belong, and like, I never was going to belong there. And I think a lot of people experience that, not just in workplaces, but just in, social circles or in families even sometimes, like you feel like, the black sheep, and like you don't really belong somewhere. And I think, that was a really hard song to write, because it's like questioning, all those things that you worry about yourself. Am I too loud? Am I too rough? Am I too this, too that, or whatever? Am I too much? And so I think at the end of the song, I kind of was just like, my parents didn't raise me to be an insecure person. They didn't raise me to not believe in myself. And it's actually okay if not everyone likes me. That's okay. That's a fine thing. And so, I think that was kind of like a moment for me when I was just like, it's okay not to be liked by everyone. So, and I'm a very intense person, so not everyone does like me.
So when live gigs got up and running again, did you ease back into it easily? Was it like just getting back on a bike, or did it take some transition?
Oh no, I was not gig fit at all. I really struggled. The first time I got back on stage, I was so nervous, and after not playing for so long, I felt really out of my depth and just didn't know, what to do. And I remember saying to my husband, "This feels really like foreign. Like I haven't done this in so long." And so we did a bunch of supports at the back end of 2020, and we had a few supports for Shane Nicholson and. What else did we do? We did a couple of little bits and pieces here and there, and then we had the Adam Harvey tour start in February, and so we've been on the road with him ever since. We just had our shows number 9 and 10 this weekend just gone with him, and so now that we've kind of back into the routine, it feels a lot more natural now, but definitely after such a big break, felt a bit weird.
So a number one album behind you now, are there any plans for actually headlining your own tour down the track sometime later this year?
Well, we just did a little mini headline over the last couple of weeks, and so we just did Sydney. So we did Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, and then we did Parks, and that's the first time I've ever done any sort of headline tour ever. And so we had a full band, and Matt Fell came and played on the Sydney show with us, and for a lot of my label, they'd never seen me do a live show before, so that was just a really rewarding thing to go and do, and we had a great time doing the shows. But yeah, we're going to follow up with another headline tour at the back end of the year for sure. So we've got 50 dates with Adam Harvey this year, and so my schedule is very, very, very full until the end of the year. And we've got a couple of festivals too that we're playing at the back end of the year, and so we're hoping to be able to follow it up probably around October, November.
Now, they say the second album is always the difficult one. Are you already thinking about album number 2? Did you do much writing last year?
I didn't do any writing last year. I did absolutely no writing. I had nothing to say. I just said it all in my last album, and I also, wasn't feeling my best self with everything that was going on. And I really took last year to kind of focus on my kids, because I thought, I was expecting to be on the road all of this year. And so last year, my kids were only 1 and 3 last year, and so we just spent the whole year just hanging out with them and making the most of being stuck in our very small Sydney apartment. So that was that was great. But no, I've started writing already for album number 2, because you're right, a lot of people struggle with album number 2. I don't feel particularly worried, but I also feel like I've got a lot of words left to say in this world, so I've started writing a few different things, and I feel like I think a lot of people get they've put the first album out and it's been a lifetime of writing to release the album. Whereas I feel like with this record, I've got a lifetime of songs that have never been recorded, but I wrote everything new. So I said, I don't want to record anything old. I want to make everything from this new time. And so I literally wrote everything the year before, aside from 2 songs that were a few years older than that, but everything else I wrote basically the year before the album came out. And so it felt all very new and fresh. And I also wanted to challenge myself as well to come up with new content and not just rely on, what what 20-year-old Rach had to say. But yeah, no, I'm excited for album number 2 and already thinking about it well and truly. And and I feel like I don't want to I don't want to take a break and have 3 years between albums. I'll probably have quite a short amount of time between my first and second album, just because I think it's important while people are interested to give them more music to listen to.
Absolutely, we'll look forward to that when it comes. But in the meantime, there's still plenty of enjoyment to be had in album number 1. Congratulations on it. It's a fantastic piece of work, Raechel, and the success that's coming your way is certainly well deserved.
Thank you. And thank you so much for your support and having me on the show. It means a lot. People wouldn't even know who I was or hear about my music if it weren't for people like you actually, taking the time to chat with me. And so I appreciate the work that you do. Thank you.
Looking forward to airing it. It'll be a 2-hour special. We'll play the whole album.
Amazing. I can't wait. How exciting. No, thank you though. I really, it's great chatting with people. And by the way, you're a great interviewer. I feel like sometimes I get on the phone with people and they ask me the most blandest questions. I'm just like, oh my gosh. And it's so hard to try and form a response. My favorite question is, so you've got an album out? And that's the question.
You got to run with that.
Having great questions.
Oh, thank you very much. I appreciate those words. And thanks for being so generous with your time on your birthday. Go and enjoy the rest of it.
No problem. I will. Thank you. All right. I'll chat with you soon.
All the best.
Alrighty. Bye.
Thanks, Raechel. Bye-bye.